let's talk about the overtimes, because a lot of controversy this week, a lot of talk this week, Bob, about the overtimes. 5 overtimes, and there are a lot of folks, including some drivers, who think that's too many. How are you coming down on that?
Well, it is too many, but I don't have a better solution. I want the race to end under green if at all possible. I mean, it's a race. The fans are going to wait there for 3 hours. They deserve the best effort for a green flag finish. And if that means 5 overtimes or 6 overtimes or 7 overtimes, then I'd rather have that than just throw up your hands and say, well, we're done.
Jim, how about you?
Well, I think Bob puts it best in the sense that if you're going to stick to this, I'm not necessarily a believer in there always has to be a green flag finish, but if your stated policy is that we want fans to see a green flag finish, and which NASCAR has said multiple times, you don't really have a choice. And I find it funny that some of the same people, as usual, in instances like this, who clamored for we must have a green flag finish, now say, oh, but 5 is too much. Well, I'm sorry. How's 5 any more different than 3? 3's okay, but 5's too much? I'm like, if you're going to do it, like sort of like Bob said, then do it. Do it till you can't do it anymore. We run races basically until it's too dark. We might as well do overtimes until it's too dark.
And they had lights, so it was never going to be too dark.
Well, that's a good point.
Never. They had lights.
We could have gone forever.
Yeah. Thank goodness we didn't. But that's the thing. I mean, first of all, and I think this is the key point, Bob, we are in the entertainment business, and it's a heck of a lot more entertaining to watch a finish like we had Sunday night at Nashville than it is to watch guys finish under caution. But I think the second point, and this is what I've heard a lot of people complaining about this week, is after they saw in New Hampshire a week ago when NASCAR was mandating when they could put on the wet weather tires and when they could put on slicks, which they never let them go back to slicks. They're going, well, why didn't NASCAR let people all come down and fill up their cars? Well, my thought is that was part of the strategy. I mean, it just happened to coincide that some people were pitting and thinking, all right, this is turning into a gas mileage race. Why penalize the people who had enough fuel?
Yeah, well, I think the decision at New Hampshire was based on safety, right? Because they felt like they couldn't have live pit stops because you had a wet pit road. So, that decision was made for safety, not for competition purposes. I think if they had their druthers for competition purposes, they wouldn't have let them refuel. And, so I thought that was the smart thing to do. I mean, you were just resuming the race on Sunday after the storm, and so you just want the race to kind of continue from the point that you had stopped it. You were going to have to open pit road for pit stops because they weren't open for pit stops before you brought them down pit road for the red flag.
And that's the thing. I mean, it didn't necessarily have to be a situation where this was a gas mileage race. It just happened to be a gas mileage race, Jim, from the standpoint that people were pitting right at the edge of their fuel mileage to get to the end of 300 laps. Unfortunately, for some of these guys, it went 5 overtimes, which meant they were going to run out of fuel. But there were people along the way who gave up track position and stopped to ensure that they would be able to go beyond that 300 laps. So my thought is, why penalize those folks?
Well, I mean, I agree, and I completely disagree with what happened in New Hampshire. And when Bob says it was a competition decision, it was, but they altered the competition. We did not just pick up where we left off. Some people were in one set of circumstances, and other people were in an entirely different set of circumstances on fuel. And that was a decision that they made based on them hoping the race wouldn't restart. And you then suddenly reset everyone on an equal playing field, which is not fair to the people who didn't play along on the guessing game. And I think that was wrong. And there's no reason why anybody could have just made and the other thing is, if it was truly a safety issue, why open pit road at all? Pit road was open every caution. For what? If they were telling you when to pit for tires, then what else would you pit for except for fuel? So why were we even having pit road open under the cautions that took place in that race? And then coming to this one, it's sort of the same thing. The ultimate people responsible for the 5 overtime situation are the teams. They all knew where they were on fuel. They all knew what chances that they were taking. And it was drivers running out. And we actually heard the conversations of people saying, just run out. Well, when you do that, what do you think's going to happen?
Yeah.
when you're one of the top 5 cars and your driver says, just run it till it's out, what do you think's going to happen behind you on a track, on a 1.33 miles speedway track where you're going 160 miles an hour? I mean, ultimately the responsibility rests in the teams. And I think there were some bad decision making simply in terms of what was the best ultimate outcome. I mean, did you really get the best outcome that you could for your team that day by some people staying out and just running out? I think obviously winning is important, but a lot of the people who made those decisions already had wins. But, it certainly made for, as you said, an entertaining end to the race.
Well, to Jim's point, Bob, is this where we see the difference that this playoff system brings, where guys like a Denny Hamlin had nothing to lose really by staying out there and running it till it went dry, whereas other guys were going to push it because this was their chance to steal a win?
Yeah, I mean, I think the playoff system certainly impacts the way you call that race, and depends, where you are in the points. Joey Logano enters barely in and decides, hey, I'm going to go for the win, instead of potentially losing, 20 points or so if for not coming in and getting fuel that would have probably have him end up in the top 10 or around 10th instead of 25th to 30th. So it's part of it. If you had no playoff system, maybe people would be even more willing to go for a win if it was a season-long points championship and they felt like they had a bigger buffer or didn't have, or had a better chance of just getting a win rather. What would it matter if you were 6th or 7th in the points? So, but certainly I do think the system helped dictate some of your strategy on Sunday.
I agree. And I think that's good. I mean, I think that what you're seeing is the playoff system doing in part what NASCAR hoped and intended to, is to add elements of unpredictability in the finishes, because based on how people want or perceive as what's most important, right? I mean, Joey Logano was, I think, the only guy who entered the overtime period close on fuel, who made it out to the other side, and he got the biggest reward for doing so. But at the same time, there were people who already had wins who you would think would say, I already got wins, I don't need another one. But yet maybe they felt the 5 points or what the bonus points and the playoff points that come along with that were just as important as gaining your first win itself. And so made the decision to just see, because we didn't know there was going to be 1 overtime or 12 overtimes. But I mean, I don't know. The interesting factor to me would be going forward, if people, what crew chiefs factor in as the final window of their pit stops going forward. I mean, do you still generally, people think like I've heard that they generally look at like maybe 1 or 2, but do you now think maybe more than that? And will that alter, or do you still just think, that's an anomaly, it won't happen all the time, stick to what you usually do?
That's what we'll have to watch down the road.
Yeah.
Will be interesting to see. All right, each week in the Raleigh Auto Parts Pit Reporters, we'll give you a chance to go to GoPRN.com and vote in our poll. And this week's question is, should NASCAR cap the number of restarts or limit the number of overtimes? Yes or no? Last week we asked you, would you trust Christopher Bell with a secret? And 59% said no.
100% of the media said yes.